Renaissance was a cultural revolution that happened in the earliest 20th century between 1910 and 1930, where Africans across the diaspora from the Caribbean to Africa to the South came to Harlem to find a new way of life, to develop a different way, and to shift the cultural identity that was oftentimes not in their control. And it was our desire to shift the perceptions of the Black identity, which oftentimes was not in our hands. And we did so through literature, music, and art. And it played a prominent role in the foundation of the modern Black identity. In the late 1800s in New York City, most Black people lived in a little area called Black Bohemia, and due to redlining and due to racism and things of that nature, Black people had a difficult time leaving the Bohemia, and in most cases, the ones who did were of upper or middle class status. At the same time, an area of New York called Harlem was being developed, and it was being developed during a time when the subway system was being developed, and it was shown and it was going to be promised for predominantly whites. It was a predominantly white community. Many of the landlords at this time refused to sell to Blacks just because of the potential of whites moving into this neighborhood. Fortunately or unfortunately, we were able to move and to develop into this area just because the property value started to drop and whites weren't interested in it. And as we started to move into these areas, it became a focal point for Africans, African Caribbeans, and Blacks and Africans who came from the South. At this time, many African Americans from the South were moving up north in search for better jobs, better opportunities of life, and better opportunities of life. We also had African Caribbeans coming to the nation, and we also had Africans who were arriving at the nation as well. And because of the nature of immigration, most of them came to New York, to Ellis Island. At the same time, we also had many veterans returning to the United States from World War I. As a result, we see a huge population boom in the African American community and the African community in this time period. With this boom came an increase in literacy and reading and comprehension skills. We saw an increase in African American literature and poetry that can be shown to the likes of people such as Langston Hughes, Sterling Brown, Zora Neale Hurston, Alain Locke, or Jean Toomer. What many of these writers seek to do is change the public perception of the Black African identity, because at this time period, many of the literary works, publications were under the control of whites, and so much of the publication added in with racial factors made a lot of the perceptions and a lot of the literary works being written by perception on the Black identity. So this is a time period when we're seeing things such as blackface, Uncle Tom's Cabin. We're seeing the cultures of Black people and as being written in such a way that was not in our control. So oftentimes the stories are either of a negative nature or a negative attitude towards us, were either depicted as thieves or criminals or vagrants or what have you. Many of these writers seek to change the perception that was done of the African identity, and this was done through publications, which was done by Hubert Harrison, The Voice, who created The Voice. Literary works by people such as Langston Hughes seek to change that perception and through their own experiences as an African in America. What we also saw was an increase in the popularity of the music that we all know and love called blues. Many blues artists such as Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Ruby Elzy, Fats Walker, and Louis Armstrong played in majority Black-only clubs. But with blues giving birth to jazz, we saw an increase in the popularity of this music at the time period, primarily in Harlem, New York. Many of these musicians played in places that you can still visit today, such as the Alhambra Ballroom, Minton's Savoy's, or the Lenox Lounge, and some of those places also were at the time predominantly, because they were white owned, only allowed black musicians but did not allow black people, such as the Cotton Club or and later on the Apollo, which went on to become black owned. Not only did we try to change the perception of the African identity through our music and through our literary works, but we also did the same through our art, through our actual art, our paintings. So artists such as Aaron Douglas and Jacob Lawrence and Augusta Savage and Lois Malwan Jones and Archibald Motley painted beautiful works of the African American experience during this time period. So what we see is not just a cultural revolution in a sense of music, but we also see it in art, and we also see it through writing as well. So this was a great cultural revolution, upheaval that Africans across the entire diaspora were doing to change and for the first time take control of the identity that we so oftentimes never really had control over, and in doing so creating a legacy and an identity that lives on through today, through artists such as Jean-Michel Basquiat, or through music in the way that we do things such as hip-hop. We owe a lot to the Harlem Renaissance because for the first time, black people across the world were now able to tell people this is who we are. And in doing so, we were able to show the world our identity, because you can see jazz being an influence in places such as the Caribbean, or even going across the seas to nations such as Japan.
Good morning. Welcome to 28 Days of Color presented by S.T.E.A.M Engine Academy. Today, our first topic, color in music, brings us to speak with Chuck LaWayne and Frank Knight. Good morning.
Good morning. Grand Rising, Supreme Awakening, how you living?
Good. So when you both started making music originally, what artists inspired you?
Because, you always get to that age, it's that certain age and time where, when you really start following something, and I always mark that period, So, and then after that, it became, as a producer, you got guys like Dr. Dre. Now when you start studying your craft and to see who's who, you really start, studying people's body of work, so then it became Pete Rock, it became DJ Premier, it became RZA, and all of these different guys, you start to analyze and see what made them great, and then you start sizing up yourself to see, where can you fit in and how can you make your own, so I would definitely say those artists, essentially started me on my path, to do music.
You got me going back for a second there. What about you, Frank?
Just my appreciation for lyricism just has evolved so tremendously, and just appreciating the styles of so many different artists. So then, you start going deeper into the underground. You start listening to your Mortal Techniques and so it just got really vast as far as the hip hop, so I always grew up in a musical household. It was a lot of hip hop and R&B in the crib, especially being a child in the 90s. And that's when my elders, my older cousins and my sister, it was the bad boy household. So my sister, all she used to listen to was Bad Boy. That was her team. I remember when Biggie died, it was crazy. She had came in the house crying immensely, and my mother was like, "What happened?" She thinking something happened in our family and stuff. And said, "Ma, they killed Biggie." And my mom's was in heart. She was like, "Why would you do that to me?" She was like, "I was ready to call your uncle."
Like that.
Yeah, and she was, and things of that nature. But that just shows you how instrumental music in that culture is to us and our people. So yeah, my range just goes so far. The way my style has evolved, I can say, is especially being younger, when I was listening to my G-Unit phase and era of music, I definitely was talking a bit more reckless and different. And that's something that I do notice just with artists and just like particular, like especially the way Chuck was talking about, you sound like your influence, and it's like you're trying to, master that style just because like it inspires you so much and you like it so much until you start coming into terms of your own identity. So as that journey began to go for my life, the journey of being a man, the journey of being a young man and being more mature in those experiences, I just wanted to be as truthful with my music. And as far as like, I do have that affinity and love towards that 90 BPM, that like 75 to 80, that boom bap, that like, I love it to the core. It's just embedded in my essence and embedded in my core. It was to show about Black spiritual leadership and Black spirituality. That's like what really like inspires the whole message within the lyrics. Because when Chuck sent the beat, it just hearing the Arabic language and then the English translation in the background, the word that occurs, it follows up with it. It just hits in such a beautiful, vibrant way. And I was like, yo, man, like, but the beat, it's just hard. It was just like, the beat was just so hard. And I was like, yo, I just want to experience with certain different flow cadences and a different vocal tone, and use like more that morning bass that I wake up with in my voice. So just utilizing that, and it was like, yo, yeah. So the reason like, yo, it's called MartinX because it's at the end of the beat. For those who hear the album, the video doesn't include this portion, but for those who hear the album, it goes into this choir and it goes, "Don't you say no," like right, and they're singing and whatnot. And then there was a pastor that Chuck had, and then it goes into a Malcolm X speech. Then we later changed that and removed the pastor and put Martin to showcase that duality of prime figures in history, not just in our just not for our people, but in history. But right now, this conversation is like we're talking about our people and how inspiring they are, and the power of their message and the way they spoke was it's music in itself. There was a rhythm of justice, a rhythm of like equality, to flow against oppression.
So with the history of our past and with the social unrest of our current lives, how would you describe the role that music is playing in the Black community to kind of address those issues? Because the past and the present are starting to look quite a bit alike.
They really are, And this is one that I always struggled with. I want to say maybe, you guys remember in 2008 when the recession hit? Yep. And some of the top songs that were on the list, it was Pop Bottle this, Party that, and at that time, I was in my early 20s, and I was not one of those guys out partying, so I kind of took the position of the what old heads were taking at that time. You understand what I'm saying? Which probably was unpopular, but when you go back to the music, they say the music always reflects the times, right? So now you fast forward now, and it's like you hear what's going on now, especially with the hottest genre that's in hip hop, and then now we got different derivatives of hip hop, and I'm always go back to always speak of drill music, and people give it a dark name when you listen to the content, and you look at what we're doing is where the country you got Trump, you got a lot of social injustice, but if you look even past the social injustice, you look what's going on in the community, and if you look across the whole spectrum, that music is reflecting the times. You understand what I'm saying? Like Black people are dying at the hands of not only the system that's been designed for us to keep us down, but also it's even permeated into our own people that's making us do crime against each other. It's created a lifestyle, I don't even want to call it lifestyle. It's created a death style.
Right. Oh, it is. Really getting those young people involved, I think, has made a big impact that I hope sticks. Because
Yes.
those voices.
This is a different time, So I honestly think, and I had multiple conversations with young people, even when you look at across sports, going back to the sports background, there's things that's happening in sports that you've never seen, happen since, guys like Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, even the modern day athlete today, is not thinking. They think a little different. They'll you got guys that they stopped playing, last year, over what was happening, over the social unrest. That's never happening. You hear guys, they care a lot more about the community. They're entrenched a lot more in the community. So I really look forward to seeing how things shake out in the future.
Well, speaking with the young people coming out with music, I know that, I've noticed a lot of poets and spoken word artists coming out to try and speak on what's happening, and they're taking on, this new role in music or in poetry. So what would you advise to these young artists coming out, trying to produce something and kind of speak on what's going on? How would you give them advice?
Anybody that's doing music, realize, like I always go back to doing the history and knowing your craft, and if you think that one of the main rhetorics you hear today, and especially in the music business, is ownership. You hear a lot of people, talking about ownership, and that's really been pivotal. That's what has been, we've been devoid of that in almost, look any industry. You know what I'm saying? That, we're the authors of the art, but we don't own it. Somebody else owns it. You look at that, some of the most biggest record labels, Death Row Records, it's not owned by a black person. Some of the greatest music we've ever heard, is not the benefits of it, the rewards of it, from a monetary standpoint. We talk about money. It's not going back to where it needs to be. So, how do you change that? I would encourage everybody to just learn the music business.
What's some good advice from you, Frank?
As far as like to the younger artists, and the young creatives, and I will even extend this in general to all creators, but like primarily since we're focused on the youth, is that be as authentic as you possibly can be to yourself, to your life. You don't need to impress anyone, if it comes at the cost of your morality, if it comes at the cost of just who you are as an individual. So just whatever you do, put love, put truth into it. No problem. Thank you so much for having us, Frank Knight and Chuck LaWayne, Slim and Mickens.
I've enjoyed it, and I can't wait for my students to see it and get involved with music. I have a few that are really interested in it, and I want to let them know where we can find your music. Where can they find you?
If you can find it we streaming on all DSPs, all platforms. You can stream the album on whether it's Tidal, whether it's Apple Music, whether it's Spotify. We also have the hard copies available. Frank, if you don't mind, you can show them give them a drop on your website.
No doubt. You could cop the hard copies at franknizza.com. So that's FrankKnizza.com.
Really appreciate you doing this for me and starting off our 28-day mini-series starting February 1st on Vimeo and YouTube and the school website. We're going to put you guys on. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you, Fab.
Thank you. Peace and love, man. Talk to you later.
All right.
Closing out our first episode of 28 Days of Color, Color in Music, I'll be reading Nina, jazz legend and civil rights activist Nina Simone, written by Alice Briere-Haquet, illustrated by Bruno Leonce. Enjoy, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 2, Color and Cosplay. Nina, Jazz legend and civil rights activist Nina Simone. Dream, my baby, dream, until you spread your wings. Hey, my child, my sweet child, you are having a hard time falling asleep tonight, so listen to my story. It starts like stories often do, with a baby wrapped in a white sheet and her mother smiling at her. This baby was black. This baby was me. I don't remember that, of course. My first childhood memory came a little bit later. I must have been about 3 years old. I thought the piano looked like there were 52 white teeth and 36 black teeth trapped in the keyboard. The black keys were smaller. The black keys take the names of the white keys around them, my teacher explained. I asked why. Because that's just the way it is. Yes, that's the way it was. White was important. Black was not. It was that way everywhere and for everyone. I could have held it against people, or worse, I could have believed I was worth less than other people. Black people were nothing but half notes on a huge ivory keyboard. But no, I did not agree with this. The notes had to mingle and dance together in the air so these lies would disappear. Music has no color. In music, there is only one rhythm, only one heart. Ba-boom, ba-boom. One heartbeat per second, the same rhythm for everyone. Standing on the bus with my eyes closed, I reminded myself of this. The years went by. I played Mozart, Liszt, Beethoven, Chopin, Debussy. I played all the important men from past centuries. I was talented. People told me so. When I was young, I was asked to give a special performance. Mom sewed a beautiful white dress with pleats and pretty ribbons. God knows she was proud. Her daughter was giving a concert. My mom, my sweet mom, she sat in the front row with her radiant smile. Then white people arrived. She had to get up. I squeezed my eyes tight so I could listen to my dreams dance in the air. But there was nothing except silence and injustice. So I refused, right there in front of black and white people. I didn't care. The only noise was my heart beating, and it was beating for my mother. It was her right to be in the front row. So Mom sat back down. She wasn't smiling anymore, and my fingers were trembling with anger. But the concert was beautiful. Hey, child, my sweet child. Later, much later, in fact, you were already born, a man arrived on our TV screens, on our radios, in our newspapers, and he said, I have a dream. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. He believed in it, and people followed him. Decent housing now, vote, jobs for all now, equal rights now, voting rights now, a decent pay now, young, gifted, and black. Martin's dream was a symphony. Black and white people could come together in the big dance of life. Hey, child, my sweet child. Sometimes it seems as if that dream came true, but the dream is fragile. You have to take care of it. Dream, my baby, dream until you spread your wings. The end.
Mas não vou sem te chamar na viagem. Espesso na viagem. Espesso na viagem. Espesso